Get out running, but I take my time. Friend of the devil is a friend of mine. I get home before daylight, just might get some sleep tonight.
One of the Grateful Dead's most beloved songs almost wasn't theirs at all. In late 1969, lyricist Robert Hunter sat in a rehearsal space with the new writers of the Purple Sage, playing bass and working through a new tune he'd drafted. The song was called Friend of the Devil, and Hunter had written it specifically for the new writers, not the Grateful Dead. But a kitchen table, an early morning discovery, and Jerry Garcia's instinct for a good melody would change everything.
Sit down running, but I'll take my time. Friend of the devil is a friend of mine. I'll get home before daylight, just might get some sleep tonight.
Robert Hunter wasn't just the Grateful Dead's primary lyricist. In the late 60s, he moonlighted as the bass player for the new writers of the Purple Sage, a country rock group that included John Marmaduke Dawson and guitarist David Nelson. Both bands shared members, rehearsal spaces, and a communal creative energy that defined the San Francisco music scene.
Talk about heartache, where in the world you been? I ain't had to live you since you've been gone.
During one of those new writers' sessions, Hunter brought in 4 verses of a new song. He later recalled, "I was playing bass with the new writers, and I had Friend of the Devil more or less already written." He played the rough draft for Dawson and Nelson, who helped smooth out some of the chord changes. At that point, everyone in the room assumed this would be a new writer's song, but there was a problem with one of the verses. Hunter had written a repeating line that went, "It looks like water, but it tastes like wine." John Dawson thought the line felt flat, lacking the punch the song needed. He turned to Hunter and asked if he could come up with something punchier for the chorus. Hunter, in a moment of spontaneous inspiration, blurted out a line that would become one of the most memorable hooks in Grateful Dead history. "A friend of the devil is a friend of mine." Dawson had just helped create the signature line of a song the Dead would make famous. Hunter recorded a rough demo of the song with the new writers and took the tape home to the house he shared with other members of the extended Dead family in Larkspur, California. He left the cassette on the kitchen table, a common practice in a communal living situation where music was always circulating. The next morning, Hunter woke up to hear something unexpected. Jerry Garcia had found the tape, listened to it, and was already playing through the song on his guitar. But Garcia hadn't just learned Hunter's version. He'd written an entirely new bridge section, the haunting Sweet Anne Marie passage, that would become the emotional center of the song. Hunter later remembered, "I took the tape back to the Larkspur house and left it on the kitchen table. When I got up the next morning, I heard Garcia listening to it. He'd written a bridge for it." The next thing Hunter knew, the Grateful Dead had adopted the song. Hunter would later put it bluntly, the Grateful Dead had snatched it up. The new writers weren't thrilled about losing the song, but there wasn't much they could do. Garcia's bridge had transformed Hunter's outlaw ballad into something bigger, and once the Dead claimed it, there was no going back. On March 20th, 1970, the Grateful Dead debuted Friend of the Devil at the Capitol Theater in Port Chester, New York. The performance came during a short acoustic set that included the early version was fast, brisk, and rooted in bluegrass tradition. Garcia and Bob Weir traded guitar lines while the rhythm section pushed the tempo forward with an urgent, rolling feel. It was a far cry from the haunting ballad version that would become the standard arrangement years later. But before the song made it to the studio, it needed one more crucial element. In the summer of 1970, the Dead gathered at Pacific High Recording Studio to lay down demos for their new album, American Beauty. Friend of the Devil was the first track they recorded, and that's when mandolin player David Grisman entered the picture. Grisman was a prominent bluegrass musician who had crossed paths with Garcia over the years. During the American Beauty sessions at Wally Heider's studio in San Francisco, Grisman happened to stop by. Garcia, who had been hearing mandolin in his head while arranging the song, immediately invited Grisman to overdub parts. In a 1981 interview, Garcia explained his reasoning. He was around, and I could very clearly hear mandolin on both those tunes, referring to Friend of the Devil and Ripple. Garcia then admitted something crucial. It's possible that if Dave Grisman weren't around, I wouldn't have thought to put mandolin on there. The signature sound of one of the Dead's most iconic songs came down to who happened to be in the studio that day. Grisman's mandolin gave Friend of the Devil its distinctive texture, a bright, plucked counterpoint to Garcia's warm guitar lines. When the song was released on American Beauty in November 1970, it immediately became a fan favorite, but the story of the song's evolution was far from over. Between 1971 and 1973, Friend of the Devil appeared sporadically in the Dead's sets. It was performed mainly in acoustic contexts, maintaining its fast, bluegrass-inspired tempo. Then, in 1974, the band took a touring hiatus. When they returned in 1976, something had changed. Friend of the Devil was suddenly a ballad, played at a much slower, more contemplative pace. According to later accounts from the Dead community, the tempo shift may have been inspired by an unlikely source. On June 30, 1972, Kenny Loggins and Jim Messina opened for the new Riders of the Purple Sage at the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Auditorium in Kansas City, Kansas. During their acoustic set, Kenny Loggins performed a slowed-down version of Friend of the Devil. The Dead's soundboard engineer, Betty Cantor, happened to be working the show and recorded Loggins's performance. Betty and Garcia were friends outside of work. She even cut his hair, and sometime after that night, she played him the tape. On September 24, 1975, the Jerry Garcia Band introduced the slow version in concert. The arrangement soon became standard for the Grateful Dead, transforming the song from a rolling bluegrass tune into a haunting meditation. The slower tempo opened up new possibilities for improvisation. By the late 1970s, Friend of the Devil had become a vehicle for extended jams. On December 26, 1979, at the Oakland Auditorium Arena, the Dead stretched the song to 9 minutes and 37 seconds. Each band member took turns soloing, weaving in and out of the melody, while the others provided a loose, dynamic foundation. A heady version commenter later noted that in this version, everyone gets their chance to shine. The performance, later released on Dick's Picks Volume 5, became one of the most celebrated versions in the Dead's catalog. In 1980, the band returned to the song's acoustic roots for their live album, Reckoning. The arrangement bridged the original bluegrass feel with the newer ballad tempo, capturing the best of both approaches, but Garcia wasn't done exploring the song. In 1991, he teamed up with David Grisman for a duo recording on the album Garcia Grisman. The stripped-down version, featuring just Garcia's voice and guitar alongside Grisman's mandolin, highlighted the song's intimate folk song qualities. It was a full-circle moment. The musician whose presence had accidentally shaped the original studio arrangement was now reimagining the song 2 decades later. Friend of the Devil became the most covered Grateful Dead song in history. Artists ranging from Chris Smither and Lyle Lovett to Bob Dylan and Mumford and Sons have recorded their own versions. Even Ministry performed it at a Bridge School benefit in 1994, demonstrating the song's cross-genre appeal. But the song's meaning extends beyond its musical legacy. Despite its provocative title, Friend of the Devil isn't a song about evil. Religious studies scholar Pittman B. Potter wrote that the song can be heard as an invitation to consider the classic theological theme of love, agape. The narrator isn't celebrating wickedness. He's so alienated, so isolated from the rest of the world, that he believes the devil is his only friend. Potter notes that the Dead songs consistently depict card players, petty criminals, gamblers, and other down-and-out souls in ways that evoke empathy. The song asks listeners to identify with someone on the margins, to feel compassion for an outlaw who has nowhere else to turn. Robert Hunter himself continued to develop the song outside the Dead's version. On his solo album, Jack O' Roses, he recorded an additional verse that never made it into the band's arrangement. You can borrow from the devil, you can borrow from a friend, Hunter sang, but the devil will give you 20 when your friend got only 10.
Say she got my baby, they don't look like me. I said I'm running, but I take my time. A friend of the devil is a friend of mine. When I get home before daylight, I might get some sleep tonight. You can borrow from the devil, you can borrow from a friend. The devil will give you 20 when your friend got only 10. Said I'll run but I take my time. A friend of the devil is a friend of mine. If I get home before daylight, I might get some sleep tonight.
The line underscores the outlaw's cynical worldview, the bitter truth that sometimes desperation makes strange allies seem reliable. 55 years after its debut at the Capitol Theater, Friend of the Devil remains a cornerstone of the Grateful Dead's legacy. It's a song that almost belonged to another band, shaped by a spontaneous lyric change, accidentally enhanced by a mandolin player who happened to be nearby, and transformed by a tape from an opening act in Kansas City. From its origins on a kitchen table in Larkspur to its countless reinterpretations across decades and genres, the song embodies the collaborative, ever-evolving spirit that defined the Dead. John Dawson helped create its most memorable line. Jerry Garcia wrote the bridge that made it a classic. David Grisman gave it its signature sound. Betty Cantor's tape inspired its transformation into a ballad. And Robert Hunter, who started it all in a new writer's rehearsal room, watched as his 4 verses became something bigger than any single artist could claim. That's the real story of Friend of the Devil, a song that belongs to everyone who ever heard it, sang it, or found a little bit of themselves in its outlaw narrator, running from the hounds and hoping to get home before daylight.